It was a grey Wednesday afternoon in late October when the call came in. The jogger in Pine Hollow Reserve had spotted a car, an older model Toyota Corolla, parked just off a dirt trail, its back window fogged up and its driver's door left open. The jogger hadn't thought much of it until on their second loop around the reservoir the car was still there unmoved. The sun was already beginning its descent behind the trees, casting long cold shadows across the muddy trail, when they decided to take a closer look. Inside the vehicle sat a young man slumped forward in the driver's seat. A single, almost imperceptible line of dried blood ran from his nose down to his upper lip. No sign of struggle, no note, just the cold, heavy silence that follows death. His name was Miles Kendricks, 22, a second-year law student with no criminal record, no reported enemies, and according to everyone who knew him, no reason to be found dead with the doors unlocked and his phone still glowing on the passenger seat. Deputy Talia Mendez was first on scene. She'd been on the force 10 years, and something about the whole picture sat wrong. No trauma, no immediate signs of overdose, and no weapon in the car. The forensic team would take days to confirm anything, but the gut feeling was instant. What made it all stranger was the phone. One unsent message blinked on the screen. Not addressed to anyone in particular, and not saved as a draft, it was just open in the text field like he'd started to type it then. Stopped. Don't. Nothing else, just that word. When Detective Nathaniel Brooks arrived, coffee in one hand and his usual notebook in the other, he stared long and hard at the screen. "Don't what?" he muttered, mostly to himself. "Don't call, don't tell, don't follow." The autopsy didn't help much. Cause of death was officially ruled as cardiac arrest, unusual for a healthy man that age, but not impossible. Toxicology clean, no external injuries. The heart had just stopped, as if he'd been scared to death. His parents, Helen and Martin Kendricks, were inconsolable. Miles had been their only child. They described him as bright, steady, dependable. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't party. His idea of a wild night was 3 hours at the law library and a Red Bull. But his roommate, Jonah Wu, had a different story. Miles hadn't been himself for a couple weeks, Jonah said, shifting nervously in his chair. He was getting these texts late at night. He never let me see them. But he started locking his door. Locking his bedroom door inside the apartment. Like he was scared of something. Did he ever say what was going on? Detective Brooks asked. Jonah hesitated. Once. Just once. I asked if he was okay and he said, "If I disappear, check my drafts." I thought he was joking. But when they accessed his phone records, things got worse. Miles had no recent outgoing texts. None to family, none to Jonah. But his deleted messages, once recovered, painted a pattern. All the messages had been erased the morning he died. All except the last word, "don't." That one strangely had never been sent or deleted. When a tech analyst recovered the previous versions of the phone's cache, they found a chain of unsaved messages. Fragments. As though Miles had started to write confessions and changed his mind. One message read, "If they find me, don't believe it was." Another, "I didn't go to the cabin. I swear I..." And the most cryptic of all, "She told me not to, but I couldn't let her. She..." Detective Brooks's attention shifted to Miles's ex-girlfriend Lena Harrow, a quiet, artistic type. According to Jonah, they'd broken up months ago, but Miles had seen her again the week before his death. Briefly, at a coffee shop near campus. No public argument, no escalation. Just 20 silent minutes, 2 lattes, and Lena walking out alone. When questioned, Lena was calm, cold even. Miles and I were finished. I met with him to return a sketchbook he left at my place. That's all. But then she added something that didn't sit right. He was always too curious. He had this obsession with fixing things, even things that didn't want to be fixed. Brooks made a note of that word, obsession. Jonah, meanwhile, had gone back through Miles's search history, trying to make sense of what had changed. That's when he found a strange pattern. Miles had been looking into something called the Stratus File, a cold case from 10 years ago, one involving a girl who went missing from the same park where Miles was found. The police had ruled it a runaway. No leads, no closure. The girl's name Cara Harrow, Lena's sister. And just like that, everything turned. That night, Detective Brooks pulled the old case file. There wasn't much. A few blurry photographs, statements from a grieving family. No body was ever found, no signs of foul play. But one line in the interview transcript stood out. Cara's final text to Lena had been just one word. Don't. Cliffhanger. And yet 10 years later, that same word had been left behind again by a different person, found in the same woods, with no clear cause of death. The coincidence was too perfect. 2 deaths 10 years apart. Same location, same eerie lack of evidence, and the same final word don't. Detective Brooks requested a formal reopening of the Cara Harrow case, a decision that ruffled feathers. The original lead investigator, now retired, had long insisted Cara was a runaway. No signs of foul play, no witnesses, no prints, no evidence. But Brooks wasn't interested in protocol, he wanted patterns. And the more he looked, the more he found. Miles Kendricks had accessed the city's public records 4 days before his death. Specifically, the archived newspaper articles and forensic notes from the Cara Harrow case. A private browser session had concealed most of it, but the fragments left behind confirmed he'd dug deeper than anyone else in years. The sketchbook Lena had returned to Miles became the next point of interest. It wasn't police evidence, just a personal item. But when Jonah brought it into the station, flipping to the last pages, Brooks felt the air shift. There were dozens of rough portraits, all charcoal, all of the same girl. Hollow eyes, long hair, different angles, same vacant stare. She told me he'd been drawing her, Jonah whispered, like obsessively. It was Cara. One page toward the back had a note scrawled in pencil, not in Miles's hand. You're too late. They brought Lena in again. This time she was less poised. Detective Brooks laid out the sketchbook and said nothing. Lena stared at the page with the message, her fingers twitching in her lap. I didn't write that she said eventually. Miles was spiraling. He wanted closure for something that didn't have any. He was investigating your sister's disappearance, Brooks said. Yes. Why? I don't know. A pause. Maybe because I couldn't. That wasn't enough. Brooks requested a forensic handwriting analysis of the note, the initial result inconclusive. It shared similarities with Lena's journal entries from her high school years, but it could have also been imitated. Meanwhile, the tech team pulled up Cara Harrow's last known phone pings. Strangely, the final signal had not come from Pine Hollow Park as assumed, but from the old water tower half a mile north, now fenced off, condemned and crumbling. Brooks and Deputy Mendez made the walk themselves. The tower loomed like a relic from another time. Rusted steel, sagging supports, a patch of graffiti sprayed across the concrete base, a crude face with dark, empty eyes. What they found behind the tower wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even visible from the trail. Just a shallow dip in the earth, moss-covered, tucked under an old slab of cement. Inside it, wrapped in layers of decaying plastic, were 2 objects, a necklace with a cracked jade pendant and an old burner phone with a dead battery. The necklace matched one described in Cara's missing persons report. The phone was a time capsule. After charging it at the station, the screen lit up. It held only 2 contacts, Lena, and a number saved simply as H. The message thread with Lena was ordinary, loving, sisterly. The final outgoing message was the one the police already knew, don't. But the conversation with H was different. Hey, you said you'd stop looking. Cara, I just want the truth. Truth gets people hurt. Cara, I'm not scared. You should be. No reply after that. No clue who H was. The number was no longer active. Jonah, however, had a theory. He pulled up an old thread from a local online forum. There was this rumour at the university back then, he said, about a professor who had an inappropriate relationship with one of the Harrow girls. People always assumed it was Lena, but what if it wasn't? Brooks ran a search of faculty records from 10 years ago. One name stood out. Professor Adrian Holt. He'd left the university shortly after Cara disappeared. No public reason given. No charges filed. Just gone. He now lived in a cabin in Ridgetop, an hour out of town. Off-grid. No phone. No social media. The next morning, Brooks drove out with 2 officers. The cabin was in a clearing surrounded by dense trees. Wood smoke lingered in the air. A stack of logs was neatly piled near the porch. Holt answered the door with a blank stare and a book in hand. Detective Brooks, he said, as if he'd been expecting them. I assume this is about the girl? What girl, Brooks asked calmly. The one I didn't kill. He stepped aside and let them in. The cabin was lined with books floor to ceiling. No TV, no computer, just paper. And in the corner, a corkboard covered in yellowing photos, some of Cara, some of Lena, and one that froze Brooks in his tracks. Miles Kendricks? You knew him, Brooks asked. I knew he was persistent, Holt replied, but not prepared. He sat down at the table and folded his hands. You have questions, he said. I have answers, but I won't give them for free. Brooks raised an eyebrow. What do you want? Holt smiled faintly. I want immunity. Cliffhanger. Before Brooks could reply, Holt slid a dusty envelope across the table. Everything you're looking for, he said. It's in here. But once you read it, you'll wish you hadn't. The envelope was thick. heavy in a way that suggested the kind of weight no scale could measure. Detective Brooks picked it up, careful not to smudge the edges. A name was written on the front in small, meticulous print, Kara H. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he stared at Holt Professor Adrian Holt, who now reclined in his chair like a man watching the final minutes of a chess game he knew he couldn't win but wanted to lose on his own terms. "We can't offer you immunity," Brooks said. "Not until we know what's in here." "Then I suggest you read it," Holt said softly, before the woods forget again. Back at the station, they opened the envelope under controlled conditions, gloves, recording devices, sterile table. Inside were 6 items. A Polaroid photo of Kara Harrow visibly distressed sitting on a green sofa. A folded handwritten letter unsigned dated the day before she vanished. A torn page from an old psychology journal underlined in red. A printed university schedule with a single office circled. A parking lot receipt from the university security booth time-stamped 2:11 a.m. And finally a second photo, Miles Kendrick's, taken from a distance sometime in the past month. The photos alone changed everything. Forensics confirmed the Polaroid was authentic and undeveloped for nearly a decade. The sofa in the image matched the one in Holt's cabin. He'd moved it out sometime after Kara disappeared, replacing it with a leather chair. But the letter was more disturbing than anything else. "Lena, if something happens, don't blame anyone but me. I thought I could help. I thought maybe if I let him talk, he'd stop following me. But it's worse now. I know too much. I didn't mean to see what I saw. You were right. I should have stayed quiet. I love you. Don't come looking for me. Please." Brooks read it 3 times, each slower than the last. Kara had walked willingly into something she thought she could control. Whatever it was, she knew it might destroy her. But what about Miles? Why was he connected to all this? The printout from the psychology journal gave the first real clue. The underlined passage referenced induced confabulation under suggestion and isolation. The term was rarely used outside of experimental therapy circles. Brooks sent it to a former forensic psychologist he knew in Chicago, who confirmed the method had once been tested in a now-defunct, highly controversial program on trauma survivors to extract suppressed memories. Most trials were shut down, but the name attached to the study, A.H. Holt, a young Adrian Holt before he became a professor. When confronted, Holt didn't deny it. "I tried to help people remember," he said, staring through the one narrow window of his cell. "But no one wants the truth once they've tasted a better lie." Kara came to me on her own. She thought she'd remembered something about her father, about the nights he'd disappear into the woods with a family dog and come back smelling of bleach. Brooks leaned in. "Are you saying her father was involved?" "I'm saying memory is a trap," Holt said. "And if Miles unlocked something she'd buried, then the last thing he read may have been the last thing she ever saw." That same night, Brooks received a call from the Harrow family's former neighbour, an elderly woman hard of hearing who'd lived 2 houses down back in 2014. She claimed she'd been visited 2 nights prior by a young man who knocked politely asking about Kara, Miles Brooks whispered. The neighbour remembered one thing. Clearly the man had asked if Kara had ever mentioned the basement. That detail hadn't appeared in any report. Kara's family didn't even have a basement, only a root cellar sealed after an old flood years ago. Brooks requested a warrant. The house was now Lena's inherited after her parents moved to a retirement facility in Oregon. She protested, of course, said it was absurd and desperate. But when the officers pried open the rusted trapdoor behind the shed, what they found silenced her. Inside the cramped, cobweb-choked cellar was a single metal chair bolted to the concrete floor with rusted chains lying limp beside it. No blood, no DNA. Just carvings. Hundreds of them. All the same word over and over. Don't. It was etched into every surface, the walls, the floor, even the underside of the stairwell. And taped to the wall beside the chair was a faded photograph nailed at the corners with surgical precision. A grainy image of Kara Harrow, standing in the woods, eyes wide, behind her a figure, barely visible, male, tall, wearing a mask made of tree bark and wire. Cliffhanger. And below that image, in the smallest, nearly invisible scrawl, were 4 chilling words written in ink so faint it took a blacklight to see. "He makes us forget. He makes us forget." The words hovered in Detective Brooks's mind long after they left the cellar. Faint, almost erased, yet deliberate, etched with a kind of desperation that suggested whoever wrote them didn't think they'd be allowed to for long. Or perhaps didn't think they'd remember having written them at all. The mask in the photo stuck with him too, bark and wire. Crude, primitive. But it wasn't just a costume, it felt like a signature, or a calling card. Back at the precinct, Brooks ordered the evidence team to scan the photo using every enhancement method they had. Meanwhile, the psychologist in Chicago sent over a deeper dive into Holt's published but quietly disavowed work. Buried in one appendix was a reference to something called the forgetting room, a theoretical space, real or imagined, where patients under suggestion might mentally deposit memories they could not cope with. Holt had proposed that some memories, if repressed deep enough, became contagious, not in the viral sense, but in that they could echo into others, particularly those susceptible to guilt, grief, or obsessive empathy. It wasn't science, not exactly. It was closer to ritual. That night, Lena Harrow was brought in again. She'd lawyered up, but the tone had shifted. She no longer looked angry, just tired. Hollow, even. "You found the cellar," she said. Not a question. Brooks nodded slowly. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't think it was real." "You lived there." "I blocked it out, like my parents did, like we all did." Brooks studied her carefully. "Did your father hurt Kara?" Lena didn't blink. "No." "But something happened to her." "Yes." "Then who was he?" Brooks slid the photo across the table. "The one in the woods." Lena looked at it and flinched, the kind of involuntary reaction you can't fake. Her eyes welled up with something between fear and memory. "We called him Hollow," she said at last, "when we were kids." Brooks froze. "Hollow." Lena nodded. Kara started seeing him first. She said he was always standing just behind the trees, said he didn't move but you could still hear him breathing. She thought it was just a nightmare. "Then I saw him too, once, after our dog disappeared." "You think he was real?" I think Kara believed he was. And when she started remembering things about the cellar, she said he got louder. Brooks couldn't shake the connection. The carvings, the cellar, the Polaroid, the text message. It all pointed back to one singular act of repression, a trauma so deep it bent reality around it. But was it Kara's trauma or someone else's? A forensic report came back from the cellar. Trace samples of synthetic adhesive on the walls matching old-school photography tape. The same kind used in film schools 2 decades ago. Miles had studied digital law. But Kara had taken photography electives her sophomore year. Her records confirmed it. And then came the discovery that flipped everything upside down. The bark mask. In 2013, 6 months before Kara disappeared, a student had submitted a short film project, ungraded, unlisted, and immediately reported as disturbing by a TA. The file had been quietly buried in university archives but still existed. Brooks got it after submitting a formal request. It was called Echo Man. 4 minutes, shot in grainy black and white, no dialogue. A girl, obviously Kara, though she looked younger, walked alone through the woods, stopping every few seconds to turn and look behind her. The camera followed her shakily. At the 2-minute mark, she stopped at a clearing. Then just at the edge of the frame he appeared. The bark mask, the wires, the same posture, just standing. At 3:42 the screen went dark, but at 3:58 a new frame appeared. A close-up of Kara crying, whispering a single word. "Don't." There was no context, no credits, no ending. Brooks felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. Was it a warning, a dramatization, or something else? Jonah Miles's roommate was brought in once more. When shown the footage, his reaction was immediate and visceral. He turned pale, started shaking. "Miles watched that last week," he said. "I didn't know what it was. He said he found it in a subfolder on a university server." "Did he say anything else?" Brooks asked. Jonah hesitated. He said it gave him a headache. And after he watched it, he couldn't sleep for 3 nights. Said he kept waking up and hearing someone whisper from his closet. Brooks stared at him. Whisper what? Just one word over and over. He didn't have to say it. Brooks already knew. But there was one last lead, one last piece Miles had left behind. At 3:14 a.m., the night before he died, Miles had placed a phone call. Not to Lena, not to Jonah, but to an old inactive number listed under his file at the law school, a number labelled Case Review Archive Room. Sub-level B. It wasn't a student number. It belonged to an old storage wing below the university library, long since sealed due to flooding and black mould. Nobody had used it in years. That's where Brooks headed next. He brought a flashlight, a mask, and 2 officers. The smell hit them first whetstone decay old paper. Rows of forgotten records stretched before them like ribs in the belly of something ancient. But at the far end, through a rusted door, was a smaller room, with a flickering light bulb still running on emergency power. On the desk inside sat a battered shoebox. Inside the box, a mini cassette recorder, a torn map of Pine Hollow with X's marked in ink, a strip of photographs from a photo booth half burned, and a handwritten note. "If I don't make it out, it's because I remembered something I wasn't supposed to. Don't follow me. Don't look for the mask. Don't listen to the recording." But Brooks, against every instinct, pressed play. Cliffhanger. The voice on the tape was Miles's. But what came after wasn't speech. It was a low choking sound, like a man crying inside a dream, followed by a whisper that made every officer in the room freeze in place. One word, breathy, wet, ancient, don't. The whisper crackled through the dusty tape recorder, curling into the room like smoke. Don't. And then nothing. No clicks, no voice, just static. But that one word lingered, as if the walls themselves had soaked it in. Detective Brooks stood frozen. The other two officers, seasoned and previously sceptical, now stared at the tape player as though it might start speaking again. One of them, the taller, more stoic of the pair, took a small step backward and muttered, "That didn't sound human." Brooks didn't respond. He rewound the tape, played it again. The same result. Miles's voice soft and shaky at first. "If you're hearing this, I must have been wrong. I thought I could unearth it. I thought maybe if I exposed the memory it would vanish. But I was wrong. It's stronger now. It doesn't want to be remembered. It wants." Then the whisper. "Don't." And static. The tape wasn't damaged. It wasn't a glitch. It had been recorded exactly that way. But something in that final whisper struck Brooks as off. Not just because it was terrifying, but because it didn't match Miles's voice at all. It was too slow, too wet, almost gurgling. Like something spoken through lungs filled with water. Later, the forensic audio analyst would confirm something stranger. The final don't didn't match any known human voice sample in their national law enforcement database. No pitch, no format, no waveform signature lined up. It was almost as if the voice wasn't a recording at all. It was something else. That night, Brooks went home and did what he told himself he wouldn't. He watched the Echo Man film again. Then he paused on the still frame, the one where Kara stood in the clearing, the bark-masked figure just behind her. He zoomed in on the mask. The grain was bad. Early 2010s camcorder quality. But something was off about the mask's eyes. Not hollow slits. No. Reflective, wet, as if someone or something was looking back. The next morning, an anonymous email arrived in Brooks's inbox. No sender, no subject line. Just a single .jpeg file. It was a screenshot from campus security footage time-stamped 3 nights before Miles died. Miles was in the frame, standing just outside the law library. And behind him, barely visible in the trees near the far lot, was a figure. Tall, still, wearing a mask. Same proportions, same haunting posture. The email's text simply read, "You should have listened to the tape." That same afternoon, Lena Harrow was found unconscious in her home. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just her slumped beside her couch, an old photograph of Kara gripped tightly in her hand. She was taken to the hospital in a state of catatonia. The doctors couldn't find a physical cause, no drugs, no injuries, just shock. But taped to her living room wall, hastily scrawled in thick marker, were 2 words. "He's remembering." Jonah called Brooks from campus that evening, breathless. "I just saw someone," he said. "At the park. I swear. Behind the trees. Just like in the photo." Brooks asked what the figure did. "Nothing. He just stood there." "Did he follow you?" "No. I left. A beat. But when I got home, my bathroom mirror was fogged up. He just took a shower. I hadn't even turned on the water." That night, Brooks couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mask. Every dark corner in his apartment felt deeper, colder. And around 3:00 a.m, his phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. Just one word. "Don't." He tried to trace it. Failed. The next morning, he revisited the sealed cellar behind the Harrow house alone. He wanted to see it again. Needed to. The rusted trapdoor creaked open like it was breathing. He descended slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The chair, the chains, the carvings, all still there. But this time there was something new. On the wall above the chair, someone had scratched a fresh line into the concrete. Not with a knife, with fingernails. The letters trembled. "You forgot her too." Brooks backed out fast, called in forensic techs. They ran the DNA from the skin fragments caught under the scratches, matched one sample to Lena Harrow, but the second sample came back as unidentified female, approximately 18, 22 years old. And here's where the impossible happened. The third fragment, a match to Miles Kendrick's. But the lab tech swore under oath the sample hadn't aged, it was fresh, left there within the last 48 hours. And Miles had been dead for 6 days. Cliffhanger. Brooks turned to leave the cellar, but at the threshold something caught his eye. A single Polaroid photograph lying on the steps. New, glossy, still drying. Of Brooks himself standing where he stood now. But in the photo, there was someone behind him, wearing a bark mask. Detective Brooks didn't breathe. The Polaroid trembled in his gloved hand, still slightly curled from chemical development. It hadn't been there when he entered the cellar, he was certain. But now somehow, the image of himself standing exactly where he stood stared back up at him, and behind his shoulder in the photo the figure, tall, still masked. The bark and wire looked damp in the image as if slick with something more than sap. The mask's slits were shadowed, but the space inside them felt aware. Brooks snapped the photo into an evidence sleeve and got out of that cellar without a second glance back. He didn't speak to anyone on the drive back, didn't turn on the radio, just sat with the hum of the engine and the drumbeat of his pulse pounding behind his ears. At the precinct, the Polaroid was scanned, digitized, enhanced. The AI sharpened filters refused to define the figure behind him. No matter what contrast or clarity levels they adjusted, the masked face stayed distorted like the lens itself had blurred on instinct. But the date stamp was legible, taken less than 30 minutes ago. It raised a question too big to ignore who took the photo, and how. That's when a second anomaly came in. The university's archival servers where the Echo Man film had been rediscovered had gone dark. Entire folders had vanished overnight, backups corrupted. IT support chalked it up to a sync error, but the head of cybersecurity said something strange. One of the logs shows a download, remote, from an external IP address that doesn't exist anymore. Brooks checked the timestamp. 3:40 near. The same time Miles had called the underground archive room the night before he died. It was unravelling now faster than anyone could keep up. Whatever Miles had found, whatever Kara had hidden it, was reaching back through time, through memory, through media, and pulling. But pulling toward what? Then Jonah called again. His voice was quiet, not panicked this time, worse, hollow. "Something's happening," he said. "I saw her." Who Brooks asked. "Kara." "Where are you?" "At my apartment." Brooks was out the door before Jonah could say more. When he arrived, the door was ajar. Jonah was seated in the corner of the living room, knees pulled up to his chest, rocking slightly. He didn't look at Brooks, just kept whispering over and over. "She remembered me, she remembered me, she remembered me." On the wall across from him, written in lipstick or blood, Brooks didn't want to guess, was a question. "Do you remember what you did?" The room was ice cold, no open windows, no vents. Brooks approached Jonah carefully. "What did she say?" Jonah finally looked up. "That we left her there, in the woods." "No," his voice dropped, "in the chair." That night, Brooks drove alone to Lena Harrow's house, now silent, sealed with police tape. He sat in his car outside for nearly an hour before getting out and walking the perimeter. Something in him itched some sense that something wasn't done, wasn't settled. The backyard was still damp from the evening rain. The air clung to his skin like breath. Near the cellar trapdoor, he saw something glint in the grass. A small rusted key. It wasn't tagged, wasn't there earlier. He pocketed it and descended into the cellar one final time. But it wasn't the same. The carvings were deeper now, more chaotic. They covered every inch of the walls. The words no longer just read "don't." Now they spiraled into sentences. "Don't let him in. Don't remember it. Don't speak his name. Don't sit in the chair. Don't look through her eyes." And in the centre of the floor, where the chains had been, was a notebook. Old, damp, brittle. The same kind Kara used in her art classes. The same kind Miles had taken from the archive. Inside were pages of drawings. Kara's face over and over, then the mask. But halfway through, something changed. The drawing stopped being human. The mask became skin. The bark began to grow roots. The wires wrapped around eyes. And eventually, there was no face at all. Just the outline of a mouth. Open. Screaming. On the last page, only one thing was written. He was never in the woods. The woods were inside us. Brooks stumbled back, nearly dropping the notebook. He fled the cellar and drove. Nowhere in particular, just away. But no matter how far he went, that last sentence kept repeating in his mind. The woods were inside us. The woods were. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, one image. A selfie. Of himself. Taken in that exact moment driving. Behind him in the back seat, a figure. Unmoving. Mask of bark and wire. Eyes hollow. Cliffhanger. And beneath the photo, one line of text she remembers now. "Do you?" Detective Brooks slammed on the brakes. The tyre screamed and the car skidded sideways on the wet asphalt, before lurching to a stop beneath a flickering streetlight. The headlights caught nothing but mist. He was breathing too hard to move. The image on his phone still glowed bright and inescapable. His own face wide-eyed and confused. The backseat behind him. Empty now, but not in the photo. He turned slowly, dread crawling from his gut to his spine. Nothing. Just the faint smell of damp earth. But the phone chimed again. A second message, no number, no contact. You were there too. There was no response he could type. What could he say to that? He drove back to the precinct in silence. No music, no radio. Only the low hum of the engine and the sharp, sterile light of his dashboard screen. Back at his desk, he opened the case files. Kara, Miles, Lena, Holt, even Jonah. He laid their photographs out in a row. Then he placed the new photo, his photo, at the centre. A knock came at his door. Deputy Mendez, pale, shaking. "There's something in the interview room," she said. "Someone," Brooks asked, rising slowly. "No, something." Room A sat at the end of the hall under a flickering bulb. It had been empty since yesterday. They hadn't booked anyone. The lights were on. The camera was rolling. Inside, sitting motionless in the metal chair, was a man. Thin, eyes closed, but he wasn't on any roster. Brooks entered slowly. The man didn't look up. He wore an old university hoodie. His hands rested on the table, mud on his shoes and around his neck. A string. On it a small round pendant. Cracked jade. Kara's necklace. Brooks took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" The man opened his eyes. They were the wrong colour, deep grey, almost tree bark brown. "I tried to forget," he said softly, "but she wouldn't let me." Who, Brooks asked. "Miles?" The man's mouth twitched. He was the first in years who wanted to remember. Not just her everything. The cellar, the woods, the name. What name? The man stared into the security camera like it was alive. "You know the name. Everyone who's seen the mask knows it." Brooks felt cold bloom in his chest. "What do you want?" "Want?" The man laughed once broken. He doesn't want. He waits. That's all he's ever done. Waits for someone to make the mistake. Brooks clenched his fists. What mistake? The man leaned forward slowly, like his bones were hollow, saying it out loud. And then the room changed. Every monitor in the precinct flickered. Every light dimmed. The surveillance camera static. Deputy Mendez burst in. "He's gone." Brooks turned. The chair was empty. No trace of the man. No fingerprints, no necklace. Nothing. But the recording from the security camera had captured one last frame before the static consumed it. A still of Brooks, alone in the room. And behind him, not the man. The figure. The mask. Again, but this time, it was smiling. That night, Brooks received a package at his apartment. No return address. Inside. A VHS tape, a folded piece of paper, a pair of broken glasses. He unfolded the note. "I found it. I found what Kara saw. The real truth isn't in the woods. It's what they left behind. It's what grows when you bury secrets and water them with silence. I filmed it. I'm sorry. Don't watch it alone." Miles. Brooks didn't own a VHS player. But Jonah did. He called him, and they met in Jonah's apartment 2 hours later. They sat in silence as the grainy film played. First forest footage, slow pans of pine trees, then the cellar. Only this time someone else held the camera. Miles. He was breathing heavily, whispering into the lens. "I followed the trail, the map led here. She left signs, carvings. I think she wanted me to finish what she started." He rounded a corner and the camera trembled. A room. Stone walls, old iron bed frame. And in the centre, the chair. Empty, but wet, dripping, and carved into the backrest deeper than any other message before. "He is not a man, he is a memory, he is a name you forgot to forget." The screen went dark, then static, screaming static. But underneath it, faintly, like something whispering from behind the glass. "Say it." Jonah jumped up and turned it off. "No," he whispered. "We're done." But Brooks was still staring at the blank screen, because in those final seconds, he saw Kara's face. Not screaming, smiling, and mouthing one word, his, cliffhanger. That night, Brooks woke to find a sheet of paper pinned to his wall. Fresh, still damp, written in his own handwriting. He didn't remember writing it. But it said one thing, say his name and forget everything else. The note was unmistakably in Brooks's handwriting. Looped letters, slanted right. The same slight downward curve on the lowercase f he'd had since childhood. But he hadn't written it. He stared at the words. Say his name and forget everything else. And below that, written in a different unfamiliar hand. That's how he wins. Brooks sat in the dark, the paper still trembling between his fingers. His apartment felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that didn't come from a thermostat but from presence. Something unseen. Something waiting. He tore the note down and flushed it. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning Jonah was gone. Not answering calls, his apartment door left open. Inside nothing was missing, no signs of struggle except, on the bathroom mirror scrawled in condensation the word, "Don't." It hadn't rained, the windows weren't fogged, there was no explanation. And taped to the inside of the front door a single photograph, an overhead shot grainy and grey. Jonah slumped on the couch, eyes open, and him, the bark-masked figure standing outside the window facing in. There was no timestamp. No camera known to Brooks could have taken that angle without being inside the ceiling. They issued a missing person alert. But deep down, Brooks knew Jonah wasn't coming back. Later that day, Brooks received a call from the records division. A sealed envelope had been left on his desk. No one had seen who delivered it. It had no return address, but the paper inside was official. A birth certificate. Name Cara Lenore Harrow, father redacted. Mother redacted, born 1994. Place unknown. In the margins, someone had scribbled in pencil. The name she forgot is the one she saw carved in the roots. It made no sense. Brooks flipped the paper over. Another scribbled line. He wasn't chasing her. She was remembering him. Brooks had heard enough riddles. He needed clarity. He returned to the cabin in Ridgetop Holt's old property. It was still under police hold, but Brooks let himself in. Everything was as they left it. Except one thing. A single book lay open on the desk. Not Holt's. One of Cara's sketchbooks. And on the inside cover in ballpoint pen written shakily. We buried the chair. It grew back. Brooks flipped through. Sketch after sketch of the figure, but something shifted. In the earlier pages, the figure stood outside of things behind trees under lampposts and reflections. But the later pages, he was closer. At doorways. Then inside. Then wearing people. Faces with cracked bark and empty sockets. One drawing stopped Brooks cold. It was of himself. Detective Brooks, in full uniform, holding a badge. But the eyes were carved open, hollow, and below his feet roots. Spreading. When he lifted the page, something fell out, a small scrap of paper torn from a spiral notebook. On it coordinates. Pine Hollow Park, the same area where Miles had been found. Brooks didn't hesitate, he drove. The woods were damp, the trail overgrown, the air too quiet. He followed the GPS pin deeper than he'd ever gone before. The trees grew dense. The sky vanished behind the canopy. And then at the exact spot he saw it. The second chair. Wooden. Rotten. Half buried in moss. But unmistakably the same as the one in the Harrow cellar. And something was tied to it. A tape recorder. The same kind Miles used. Brooks picked it up. It was already playing. A voice whispered, "You're getting close now, but you'll forget why you came. He wants that. That's how it works. You don't remember finding the chair. You just remember not being the same after. If you're hearing this, don't sit down. Please don't sit down." And then another voice. Not Miles. Older, slower, deeper, cracking like dry leaves. "Say my name, detective. Say it, and let go." Brooks turned to run, but the woods behind him were gone. Not in the literal sense, they were still trees, still moss, still earth. But they were wrong. The trail had shifted. The air was wrong, the light not coming from above. It was coming from beneath. His feet moved on instinct. He ran faster, deeper blind, until he saw her, standing in a clearing facing away from him. Cara, wearing the same sweatshirt from the Echo Man video. Still, silent. He called her name. She didn't turn. He stepped closer, and closer. Then she finally turned. And she wasn't Cara anymore. Her face was empty, carved, opened like a hollow mask, and from inside the empty space where her eyes should have been, a whisper. "You already said it." "Cliffhanger," Brooks screamed, but no sound came out. And in that frozen silence, the trees around him began to whisper as one. A name he couldn't remember, a name he could almost hear. But the more he tried to hold it, the more of himself began to slip away. The whisper echoed without sound. Not through the air, through him. Brooks staggered backward, throat locked in a silent scream, every cell in his body vibrating with a name he couldn't recall. It hovered just outside the reach of a language, and the more he tried to hear it, the more everything else started to blur. His badge, his past, even his own name felt dimmer, more abstract. The figure that had worn Cara's face began to dissolve into shadow and bark. Her outline flickered like an old reel, stuttering on its final frames. As she vanished, Brooks caught a final glimpse of the mask she left behind, floating mid-air for just a moment before it fell soundlessly to the moss. He didn't dare touch it. Instead, he turned, and the woods turned with him. The trees were no longer inanimate. They leaned gently inward, every branch angled as if pointing to the centre of something, or someone. He stumbled through them, breath-shallow eyes scanning for some kind of logic, some tether to reality. His phone was gone. His watch had stopped. Even the sound of his boots on the dirt floor had faded. And then through the clearing he saw it. A third chair, identical to the others, but this one was clean, new, waiting, and beside it stood a mirror, cracked, framed in twisted wire. Brooks approached cautiously. He glanced into the mirror and nearly fell. His reflection wasn't alone. Behind him the masked figure, closer than ever. But as he turned to confront it, nothing. Just air, just trees. But in the mirror it remained, still, watching. Waiting, suddenly the audio recorder in his coat pocket clicked on. He hadn't touched it, hadn't even known it was there. Detective Nathaniel Brooks, age 47, former Homicide Unit Precinct 41. Last seen investigating an unsolved missing persons case. It was his own voice, recorded weeks ago. I'm making this in case I forget why I started. In case he finds a way in. You'll know he has when you start remembering things that never happened, and forgetting things you swore you'd never let go of. There was a pause, a breath. If you're hearing this, it means I found the name, or worse, I said it. Click. Static. Silence. Then a sound, not from the recorder, a sound from the earth. Beneath his feet the ground pulsed. He dropped to his knees as tremors rippled beneath the moss and something began to emerge. A hand. Fingers of bark and bone reached up from the soil, grasping, pulling. A shape rose from beneath. Humanoid. Root-wrapped. The mask already in place. But this time the figure spoke. Its mouth opened to wood, creaking like wet rope, and said, "You were the one who buried me." Brooks stumbled backward. "No," he muttered. You watched her disappear. You let the truth rot. And now you remember." "No," he shouted, "that wasn't me." But images crashed through his skull like shrapnel. A younger Brooks watching from the hallway as Kara screamed behind a locked door, a hand gripping a flashlight as he turned away from the root cellar. A forgotten report unsigned slid quietly into the closed pile. He had been there, not as a detective, but as a rookie. A cop told to stay quiet, to trust the department, to let it go. He had remembered her, and then he'd forgotten. Because he was told to. Because that's how it spreads. He backed away now, sobbing. The figure advanced slowly, dragging roots that bled sap behind it. "You know my name," it whispered. "I don't," Brooks sobbed. "You said it." "I didn't." "You dreamed it." "I don't remember." But even as he screamed, he heard himself whisper the name, not aloud, but in the deepest part of him. It sounded like cracking wood, like wind caught between ribs. It sounded like home. And as soon as he did, he woke up. In his squad car, engine idling, radio crackling softly. No woods, no chair, no mask. Sunlight bled through the windshield. He sat there, breath held, waiting for the hallucination to return. But nothing did. The clock said 7:04 a.m. He'd been missing for over 12 hours. He drove to the station. It was still standing. Deputies waved to him like nothing had happened. Jonah was still gone. Lena still in the hospital. The woods still marked as an active scene. Had any of it been real? Brooks opened his locker, reached for his badge, and then froze. Inside, tucked between his spare shirt and his holster, was a small paper card. White. Blank. Except for one word scrawled in ink that was still drying. "Don't!" Cliffhanger. And just beneath the card, wrapped in soft velvet, was the bark mask. Fresh. Damp. And shaped unmistakably to fit his own face. The velvet was wet. Not soaked, but damp enough to bleed its colour slightly onto the folded edges of the bark mask within. Detective Brooks didn't touch it. He just stared paralysed at the thing that should not be there, could not be there. It wasn't a replica, it was the mask. The grain of the wood curled along the jawline, warped in unnatural ways, as if it had once fit someone but now waited to fit him. Brooks stepped back, heart pounding. The fluorescent lights in the precinct flickered overhead just once, just enough to make the silence feel deeper. He looked at the card again. "Don't." But it wasn't a warning anymore. It felt like a command. A mantra. A last thread holding something back. And the worst part was, he didn't know if he'd written it himself. He drove, not to the hospital, not to the woods, but to the Harrow's old house, now condemned. The cellar door had been resealed by police order caution tape still fluttering in the breeze. But Brooks didn't hesitate. He broke it open. This time he descended without a flashlight. The dark didn't matter anymore. The cellar was colder now, quieter. The carvings had multiplied. Every surface now bore not just "don't" but other phrases scratched deeply like screams written into stone. He's older than remembering. The roots feed on silence. You didn't bury him, you fed him. The chair in the centre was gone. In its place a circle of mirrors, all broken, some fogged, all turned inward, and in the middle resting carefully atop a black box. A case file. His badge number was stamped on the corner, a folder that didn't exist in any system. He opened it slowly. Kara Harrow, age 19. Missing person, witness statements, a crude map, but stapled to the inside was something he'd never seen. A signed statement, his own name at the bottom. It was a suppression order. Filed under police authority, sealed, buried. Subject made credible claims involving ritual trauma hallucination and group delusion. Recommends psychological referral. No criminal investigation warranted. Close file. Brooks stared at it, hands trembling. He had forgotten he signed this. He had willfully forgotten. He remembered Kara. He remembered seeing her shaking in the hallway. He remembered hearing what she said. He just chose not to believe her. And in that silence it grew. The mask, the woods, the voice. They weren't hauntings. They were echoes. Echoes of truth buried too deep. Echoes of every case closed too quickly. Every survivor dismissed every strange report labelled unfounded. That night he hadn't buried a body. He'd buried a witness. And now it wanted him to take her place. Brooks returned to his car. He placed the mask on the passenger seat. It stared at him like it had eyes. Back at the precinct, he made a decision. He filed a report, unsealed everything. He named names his own among them. He released Holt's notes, Kara's film, Miles's map, all of it. He posted it online, to press, to private investigators, to archivists, to the public. And at the end of the file he wrote only, "If you're reading this, it means I remembered. Please don't forget what she tried to tell us. Don't let him grow again." And then he disappeared. Left his badge on the desk, car still in the lot. Gone. Only one thing left behind. The mask, split cleanly in two, as if it had been refused. 2 weeks later, Lena Harrow awoke from her coma. She didn't speak for 2 days. Then finally she said one thing to the nurse. I heard someone say his name, but then he changed it. Who, the nurse asked. Lena looked to the window where the wind whispered through the trees. The one who waits behind your memory. Epilogue. Detective Brooks was never found. But they say sometimes at the edge of Pine Hollow hikers still come across carved trees' fresh bleeding sap. And if you lean close you might hear a whisper on the wind. Not a name, not anymore. Just one word low and trembling. Don't. Thank you for listening. If this story haunted you, moved you, or made you think twice before ignoring a whisper in the woods, please consider subscribing. Share the truth. Remember her name. And above all, don't forget what they buried.